Good day, MET330 students. In this video, we're going to talk about FORTRAN file I/O, or file input and output. Previously, we've been using standard input and standard output to both read and write from our programs. But that only offers us limited success, such that we might want to print out to a file or read in from a file, especially if we have lots of data we're dealing with and we don't want to have to input it all by hand. And this video will unlock how we do this in FORTRAN programming. And so ultimately the question that's governing our work today is, how can I have my program read and a little bit of write from a file? And so the main thing about reading or writing from a file is being able to open up and access the computer for reading and writing purposes. And so in FORTRAN, we have a statement that we need. It's called the open statement. And so ultimately, we need to open our files for both reading and writing purposes. And so within our program, then, we need a way to then identify this file. And that is through this first part of the statement called the unit number. And so unit equals, and then you put in an integer number for that unit number. That unit number is then linked to our read statement in that first star and the star comma star. So previously, when we were doing standard input for reading, this was just a star, and it was reading from the terminal window. But now we're saying, I want to read from unit number 12, which unit number 12 then goes back to this open statement, which is going to be connected to a file. So we're going to have to still fill out a little bit more of this open statement. And then I'm going to read a value into the variable called iValue. You can use any positive integer for the unit number, but don't use 5 or 6. Those are reserved for standard input and outputs. And again, this is going to be used to refer the file for reading and writing purposes. So first we have our open statement with our unit number, but then we need to specify, well, what file are we opening, whether for read or write purposes. And so then our second part of our open statement is file equals, and then within quote marks, the relative or absolute path to the file we are reading from or writing to. And so, for example, you might have something like this, /home, /username, /grades.dat. Then you might be reading from unit file 12, which would be this file, and say there are 3 grades in there. Then I'm going to read those 3 grades in. Again, this is an absolute path starting with the full slash. It could be just grades.dat if you were going to run this program within a directory that contains that file. That would also work. You could also give a character variable for this instead of having it written out here. But in general, just writing it out right in the open statement is just fine. And again, reading all 3 grades would expect that these grades would all appear on the same line. Finally, we need to tell FORTRAN what is the status of this file. And there are 3 options. That the file is new, that the file is old, or that the status is unknown. And so if you have status equals new, that means it's never been created before, and it can only be used once. Generally, you're not going to want to use this for a file status, especially for a read status, because by using a file for reading, that invariably means it has already been created. The file status old is when you know that the file exists. So for read statements, that would be common. And maybe the most useful, though, would be unknown, which this would then create a new or overwrite an old file if you are writing to the file. And so new would be another way to do write when we didn't want to overwrite a file, so that we wouldn't accidentally overwrite something. And again, these statuses are more important for write statements, writing to a file, than it is for read statements. And so in general, you can use status unknown, status equals unknown, and that would probably satisfy most of your purposes. And so here's the overall kind of structure of reading from a file. We're going to have the open statement with our unit equals and then our integer number, file equals, and then the string of the absolute or relative path to the file we're going to read, and then our status equals either new, old, or unknown within quote marks. Okay, and so our unit number is for reference within our program to be able to read or write to that file. The file name is the actual link to the file within the program, and then the status is information about that file. We have to keep in mind that when files get really large, we can't necessarily hold everything in memory for a long time. And so what is proper is that once you are done reading from a file, you want to close that file with close unit equals and then the unit number for that file, or just close and then that unit number within the parentheses. This frees up that unit number to be used elsewhere throughout the program. This is especially important for writing to a file, as closing that file will kind of close out the operation and write everything to disk. So don't forget to close your files after you're done reading all of the information, and after you're done writing all the information before you get to the end of the program. Writing to a file is very similar to read, same open statement to gain access to a file on the disk, whether it's there or not. Here, old or unknown will override a file for the status, but new will not. And again, here, with our write statement, writing is similar to printing, except here with write, we can print to a file. And so write 20 would write to the unit number 20. And that file associated with that. And for example, we may write out mean temps. So writing, similar to reading, still have to open the file, but now instead of reading from the file, we're going to write to the file instead of writing to standard output. In a future video, we're going to write some code and look at this file_read opportunity. So go ahead and get this file copied over, file_read.4, into your MET330 directory. And in another video, we're going to actually look at this file and use it. Pretty easy to read and write from a file. There are some nuances that we'll talk about when we actually write some code. That's it. Thanks for watching.